Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hi everyone, my name is Rick Firestone, and I'm the host of the Pixel Project Radio podcast. If you've never heard of us before or haven't checked us out, Pixel Project Radio is a video game discussion style podcast where we do deep dives and analyze all of our favorite games, and some of yours too. We put out roughly 3 episodes a month, sometimes more, talking about a variety of different video games and gaming genres. We tend to do episodes in 3 different formats. Sometimes we do video game adjacent episodes, such as the music of Nobuo Uematsu. We will sometimes take a game and do a generalized discussion and analysis of it, talking about its dev history, mechanics, thematic identity, score, things like that, but we don't get too in-depth with the story. We talk about it, but it's not beat by beat, because the third style of episode that we like to do, and generally these come out at the end of the month, is a beat-by-beat story analysis of a game. We go through the story top to bottom after talking about the dev history, the mechanics, and etc., analyzing it beat by beat in a completionist sort of way. It's a lot of fun, it's very enriching to me, and I love making this show for everybody. If you end up checking out the show and like it, let me know. Reach out to me, and let's get to talking. I'd love to get to know you. But today, I am here to tell you about a game that I love. This is a JRPG that is stuck on the PlayStation 2, a JRPG that came out in the early 2000s by one of my favorite creators of all time, scored by one of my favorite composers of all time. I'm talking about Xenosaga Episode I. Let's get into it. Xenosaga is everything I look for in a JRPG. Coming as a direct successor to the JRPG masterpiece that was Xenogears in 1998, Xenosaga sought to continue the universe and thematic identity that its predecessor laid for it. After funding for Xenogears was internally shuffled into the main Square projects of Final Fantasy, writer and creator Tetsuya Takahashi, along with his creative partner and wife Kaori Tanaka, better known by her pen name Soraya Saga, felt artistically stifled. This creative disagreement with Square led to the two of them branching off to form Monolith Soft, their own independent game development company. It is here that the seeds for Xenosaga are planted, codenamed at the time Project X. Xenosaga is a massively ambitious JRPG set in the style of a space opera. It seeks not to be a run-of-the-mill video game, but an established work in its own right, a work with heft, with artistic substance drawing from literature and philosophies of the modern world. To give you an idea of what I mean, we can start with Episode 1's subtitle, Der Wille zur Macht. With apologies to the pronunciation, this translates to the will to power, a direct reference to the philosophical concept of the same name first put forth by Friedrich Nietzsche. The concept of the will to power is too broad for the scope of this episode, and indeed Nietzsche himself never explicitly defines the concept within his own works. To give you an idea of why Takahashi and Saga chose this particular concept for the themes of Xenosaga, here is a brief excerpt from Nietzsche's most famous work, Also sprach Zarathustra. Quote, "Where I found the living, there I found the will to power. And even in will of those who serve, I found the will to be master. Only where there is life is there also will. Not will to life, but, thus I teach you, will to power." End quote. Takahashi and Saga were both deeply fascinated not just by the works of Nietzsche, but also the works of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, as well as religious concepts found within Christianity, Judaism, and Gnosticism. What sets Xenogears and Xenosaga apart from other JRPGs that often utilize similar points of inspirations is in their implementation. These are not knowing winks and nods from the developers to educated audience members. It isn't a proverbial way for them to say, "Did you see that? You know what that is." These references are fundamental to Takahashi and Saga's works, foundational to the identity of the Xeno series. Where do we come from? What is man's true nature? How do religion and philosophy coexist? It is these musings that draw the marrow from the bones of these works and what makes them truly special. Xenosaga Episode I initially has the player take the role of protagonist Shion Uzuki, an employee of Vector Industries and a phenomenal technological talent, a wonderkind. Shion is undergoing final testing for a project named Cosmos, a human-presenting robot that serves as a weapon to protect humanity. Cosmos, by the way, is an old Greek word that translates to order. Cosmos' purpose is to combat the Gnosis, a race of somewhat fish-like alien monsters that have begun to occupy the human plane and destroy all they touch. While this is the immediate threat of the local plot, the global plot features corrupt political maneuverings, corporate espionage, and many creations and eventual betrayals of alliances between friends and foes alike, all for the purpose of obtaining power. The will to power, indeed. Much like Xenogears, Xenosaga was a project lacking in neither scale nor ambition. The original concept was to have a total of 6 episodes, but due to internal budget, implementation, and planning issues, was cut down to only 3. This series, the first that truly was Takahashi and Saga's baby, meeting the same fate as Xenogears, must have surely struck a blow. Nevertheless, the project was finished, and the end result is one cohesive narrative stretching across 3 games. One thing that makes recommending this game slightly difficult is exactly that. While Episode 1 has an exciting story in and of itself, at its conclusion we are ultimately left with more unanswered questions than anything else. These questions do wrap up through Episodes 2 and 3, to be sure, but it's something players must be aware of going in. You need to be in this for the long haul to get the optimal experience out of these underappreciated gems. While the narrative is certainly an accomplishment in this game, the characters are a major highlight as well. These characters are realized and fully fleshed out. Players get to see into the minds and emotions of each and every one, and each character gets plenty of attention and care with their respective scenarios. Oftentimes, such as in Xenogears or Final Fantasy VI, some characters and their stories are clearly afterthoughts. Not the case here. Take, for example, the tragic character named Jan, better known in the game as Ziggurat 8, aka Ziggy. In his life, Ziggy was a counterterrorism agent working for one of the game's largest corporations. After witnessing the murder of his wife and stepson, Ziggy chooses to take his own life. He would not find rest, however, as his body was recycled and ultimately revived due to a piece of legislation known as the Life Recycling Act, an act that allowed a corporation known as Ziggurat Industries, that's where he got the name, to reanimate the dead into cyborgs for the purpose of effective utilization of the dwindling human population. Ziggy was brought back to life against his will and now cannot die. He is a character of profound sadness, bearing the grief of a broken man that is now eternally searching for peace and for acceptance. There are a host of amazing characters in Xenosaga, and it would take far too long to go through each of them, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention my favorite JRPG villain of all time introduced in this very game, Albedo Piazzolla. I don't want to get too much into Albedo for fear of spoilers, but I will say this. Albedo is a perfect marriage of a villain with motivation and psychopathy. He has immense intelligence and motivation to consciously carry out his antagonistic plans while still being unhinged enough to oftentimes elude human understanding and terrify all those around him. In one of the most infamous scenes in the game, Albedo finds himself alone in a room with one of the player's party members, a young girl named Momo. This scene begins with Albedo quoting Shakespeare, "Frailty, thy name is woman," and further probing into her insecurities and fears. The scene ends with him forcibly ripping off his own head. Don't worry, he's not dead. Maniacally laughing all the while, the detached head meeting the eyes of Momo, continually antagonizing her with her deepest insecurities and fears, all for no express reason other than psychological torment. He's doing this solely to get into the mind of this helpless girl. Underscored by the brilliant music of Yasunori Mitsuda, and the impeccable, career-defining performance of Albedo given by Crispin Freeman, this scene is simply incredible. And it's only one of many. Xenosaga has no shortage of drama, heightened musical moments, and fantastic voice acting. It also has no shortage of cutscenes. This is often called a con of the game, a criticism if you will. The game features around 8 hours of cutscenes. Indeed, most of the important story beats and moments are told through cutscenes, leaving the rest of the open world aspect where you're actually playing and roaming the world as little more than exploration and world building. Don't misunderstand though, world building is Takahashi and Saga's bread and butter. It is what they are adept at. Adept is perhaps even too weak of a word. They are masters at this. Xenosaga features some of the most intense world building I have ever seen in a game, and it is one of the many things that makes this game so special. The gameplay in Xenosaga Episode I is a turn-based system that evolved out of Xenogears. Each character still has 3 attack types, a melee attack, a sort of energy attack, and a special attack. You can generally do 2 or 3 per turn, or you could use only 1 to save and build up your AP, allowing you in future turns to use more powerful attacks. The battle system is true turn-based, much like Final Fantasy X and Lost Odyssey. You'll even see an indicator showing you who's up next and who is after that. Who's on first? Exactly. Some characters are able to summon mechs into battle, allowing the mech to take that character's place if a battle is turning out to be too difficult. There are more finer points to the battle system, but this is the gist of it. If I had one criticism, it's that the battle animations play out fairly slowly. Emulating allows one to fast forward. For me, this is the preferred method, if only to save time should you choose to grind. Outside of that, it's a perfectly serviceable and fairly balanced battle experience. It isn't reinventing the wheel, but it has plenty of quirks and specialized options to provide players with a challenging experience and a good time. The Xenosaga series is one that deserves so much more love and appreciation from JRPG fans and gamers alike. Unfortunately, due to what I assume is a perceived lack of interest and rights management, or maybe mismanagement, the Xenosaga series is locked on the PS2. While you can play Xenogears by purchasing it through the PlayStation Store on the PSP, the PS Vita, or the PS3, Xenosaga is not able to be legally played anywhere outside of on original hardware, physical discs. This is doubly unfortunate because each episode goes up in price, with Episode 3 regularly being sold for $300 to $400 depending on the market at the time. And I think that is a true shame. The price of retro games, yes, that's also a shame, but also that this masterwork of a JRPG is so modernly inaccessible. Fear not, though. Episode 1 and 2, I can say from personal experience, are very emulatable. I recently played through the entirety of Episode 1 on my Steam Deck without a single complication. I could talk about Xenosaga for days. It is a revolutionary JRPG. It is world building at the highest level. It is everything I look for in a JRPG. Tragic characters, relatable characters, political drama, world building, world-class compositions. Again, remember, Yasunori Mitsuda also did the music for Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, and Xenogears, just to name a few of his contributions. Everything about this is perfection to me. If you do decide to play it, give me a holler. I would love to talk about this game with anyone, whether it's the high theoretical concepts, the thematic ideas of Carl Jung or Friedrich Nietzsche, whether it's about the religious practices and implications of Christianity or Gnosticism, or even if it's just about the game's plot to get rid of these nasty aliens known as the Gnosis. I love it all. I hope my enthusiasm was at least a little bit contagious. Xenosaga Episode I. Give it a chance. You'll be glad you did. And hey, Namco, if you're listening to this, I know you are. Put Xenosaga onto modern consoles, you cowards. And to the rest of you, As ever, happy gaming.
Do you find yourself playing older games and wishing that there were new discussions about those games? Enter Tales from the Backlog. Hi, I'm Dave Jackson, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest to break down those games that may be stuck in your ever-expanding backlog. Each episode looks at one game in depth, focusing on mechanics, story, music, and other aspects with no spoilers until a clearly marked spoiler wall in the middle. If you've played the game, go ahead and climb that spoiler wall and enjoy in-depth story discussions, and if not, jump out when we warn you and maybe go play that game for yourself. We have over 100 episodes in the feed, everything from Disco Elysium to Tunic to discussion episodes about how to get into horror games, and if games actually need to be fun, or if they have more to offer. I guarantee that there's something in there for everybody. Once again, that's Tales from the Backlog, available wherever your podcasts are found.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.